to Weekly with Wick. If you saw last week's episode, you know that I am Heidi Mendenhall, and I am honored to be here today with Sonia Bravo.
Hi.
And we are taking a little pivot this week. In true Love Local form, we are honoring what has been requested, what has been talked about, and we really saw the need to think about our mental health and our spiritual health. There were some great questions on Facebook, some great conversation. And before we can start with thinking about community mental and spiritual health, we have to start with people. And so today we're going to get to share one story, and I'll probably get to share a little bit more of my story so that we can hear from two different people around what our experiences have been and really, truly the personal level of our community. So with that, I'm going to pivot and welcome Sonia.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So last week I shared that I experienced a lot of anxiety in sharing this, that I was a positive case in mid-July, and I was asymptomatic. And the emotional and spiritual impact of every moment from that moment forward that I found out I was positive was shifted and changed. And I can't imagine what that might have been like for me if I had been symptomatic and I had actually experienced the physical symptoms. And so I am inviting you to share with us a little bit about what that was like for you.
Going back to, everything for us started July 13th. That was the day my sister got admitted to the hospital. And, I think from that day forward, our lives have been scarred. There was a lot of, our symptoms were pretty much what they have described, the coughing, fever, chills in the bodies, all that kind of stuff, but it did hurt us physically and mentally because, I just didn't have one family member or two. We had 3 family members at the same time, and my sister was in the ICU, and she went, as soon as she got admitted, she went straight to the ICU. She was losing her oxygen really fast, and during that time, everybody in the family was already kind of feeling the symptoms, and Tuesday comes around, because that was a Monday. I remember that was a Monday. My dad's like, I can't breathe, and my sister decided to take him to the hospital, He got admitted as well, but he was more observation at that point. I don't know if I should, but COVID has 2 phases, It has the phase that, you're feeling all terrible inside and everything. And it has the phase that, if you have your loved one in the hospital, it's like, how do you, like it's a new virus, Yeah.
The fear.
Yeah, the fear is like, oh my God, they're not going to have the right, I that's what I was going through my head.
Right.
I was like, what am I going to do, and once my dad was in the hospital, it's like, well, great.
How can you be there?
Yeah, and yeah, we couldn't even be there, we couldn't be like, can we go visit them? It's like strictly no, So that was it, she went on a vet, and then by the 3rd day, by the 2nd day she was in the vet, we had to talk to the doctor, and that call that they say, I don't want to get, we got it with my sister as well, they told us like, hey, there's, like she created an infection, a blood infection, so she needs plasma ASAP. So we're like, what do you mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Her body was giving up. Like there was like, they had to rush that plasma from Sacramento. And if they had it in certain times, so we had to make like that decision right there and then, like, yes, you guys can do that, or no, you guys can do that, and her time was ticking. And we didn't even know if plasma was going to save her.
You had to make all those decisions without actually getting to see
exactly.
her
And during this time, I want to let you know, my mom was getting very ill. So it wasn't like my mom or my dad could make a decision for her, I was like in my head, like, how am I going to tell my dad if he comes back? Like, his daughter's not here, or, that's the scary part about COVID. And that's the part I don't understand why people don't understand, But that happened. and thank God she got a good plasma, because by the 5th day, we saw improvements. There was an improvement, and her oxygen levels were able to stay stable. They were proning her. I don't know if you guys.
I don't know what that
Proning is that they will flip her, like on her back, on her belly, and then they'll flip her on her back. So the thing is that when she got plasma, she was only able to stay prone, which the doctor said that was not a good sign, because she had to be able to flip on her back, and every time they flip her, she'll lose oxygen. So, they were dealing with that, but then that got better, and, she was on the ventilator for 8 days.
That's a long time. That's a long time to be.
Yeah,
to be
in the ICU she was for 15 days. So she was there for a long, long time, Not a long time, but, enough time for us to not be able to sleep. We had COVID during this time, so imagine having somebody in the ICU, both my dad and my sister in the ICU, because by this time my dad was already in the ICU. We never told my dad what had happened to my sister, just because we did not want to worry him. But then now we find out, now that he's talking to us, oh yeah, I knew. And we're like, oh,
Dads
what?
know everything,
Yeah, he's
right?
like, yeah, a doctor came in, and then he's like, oh yeah, your daughter, we just put your daughter in a vent. So I was like, oh God, I'm like, that's great. I was like, I asked not to tell him, I told the nurses, please do not let him know that his daughter just went on vent. And they're like, yeah, no. But then now my dad, he's like, no, I knew that she was in a vent.
But he's like, stronger than you thought then, right?
Yeah, he is, and then here comes my dad a week later, he was put in a vent, and his was the worst,
See, you mentioned, I kind of want to circle back to, you mentioned that COVID has two phases. And
yeah.
I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but what I immediately went to was there's the physical symptom phase, and then there's the emotional pain phase.
Yeah.
And when I hear you describing 15 days is not long, like, it's not long, but it's a really long time to be emotionally separated from somebody you love dearly.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think that we all haven't had the experience of having COVID, and that's something that we're grateful for in the community, but we've all had the experience of being emotionally separated from a loved one.
Yeah.
And I think that is something to really hold dear, that emotional pain is very real.
Yeah, and it's a pain that that they're sick, and you don't know if you're going to see them again. Like, it wasn't like we could go up and, like, one by one and see her. The hospital's like, no visitors, like, nobody can come in. Only Zoom. It's like, how terrible can that be, It was very terrible. It was the ugliest thing I think I have ever gone through, and having both my parents and my sister at the same time. Oh God, like, I don't even know how I'm here standing and talking to you,
Because you're strong.
And I've tried so hard for my family to go through it, I don't know if there's some other people that have been in my position, but it's the worst, It has been the worst.
You mentioned a doctor that was really great to connect with and kind of gave you some hope.
Oh yeah. So my dad was in his second week of the vent, and then things were not looking great. He started with a pneumonia. There was a pneumonia going on that was developing because of COVID, and then other things happened in between, and he started bleeding. His lungs started bleeding. So that's when that New York doctor came down. I don't know her name. I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter. Okay. She knows that who she is.
Yeah. And, the nurse called me early in the morning. They're like, hey, they need to speak with you regarding your dad. And just by the way the nurse sounded, I was like, can you please tell me this is not what I think? She's like, I'm sorry, honey, I tried, but your dad is not looking good. So they're going to call you, and, they're going to tell you what's going on. And so we waited for that call. I had all my brothers and sisters with me, and that's when they started, The lady started saying, are you guys sitting down? Because this is going to be very hard to take. And she basically told us, all the medicines that this hospital has, they're in your dad's body. And nothing at this point is helping your dad. Like if your dad is getting worse. And she specifically told me that she has to work with hundreds of cases in New York that look exactly like my dad. And none of those cases survive. So for me to get I went crazy,
I don't think we call that crazy.
Yeah.
I think we call that sad.
Yeah, and all my sisters and brothers we were just we couldn't see what was happening. And then I want to say something like my dad was the healthiest person. So 2 months prior COVID, he had gone to his doctor, and he came back, with blood work done, and he was so happy because he was the healthiest man. He's like, oh my God, I'm so healthy. Like, oh, I got up my blood work. I think I'm the healthiest person. He had no underlying condition that will take him to this level, Yeah. And for him to be like that, the doctor telling us, it was just the worst. She did told me, these were her exact words. She's like, your dad has no more hope. Because I asked her, is there a chance for him to survive? And she replied with, your dad has no hope at this point. Like, there's no hope, And she did ask me at this point, like, are you a religious person? I'm sorry to ask. I'm not supposed to ask, but I want to ask you. And I'm Catholic. And this doctor was Catholic herself, And she told me, us Catholics believe in miracles and prayers. So as a doctor, I can tell you, there's no more hope. There's nothing that I can do. He has everything. Like there's nothing can save him. But as a person and as a human being, only a prayer will save your dad. And you know what? The next day, we got the same call from her. And these were her words. She's like, I don't know if it was your prayers or a miracle, Sonia, but your dad stopped bleeding. So I don't know what happened. And after that, my dad started getting better, He was in the ICU for 47 days and the vent for 24 days. And then he went out to a specialty hospital because he had a truck. So they had to wean him off. And he's still in oxygen. He's back home, thank God. But he's still in oxygen, He's recovering. He was 88 pounds when he left the ICU. And it has changed in a lot of aspects, trust me, because I work in, I'm a ophthalmology technician, so I work with people's eyes, And when I went back to work, I was very scared, because I was like, oh my God, I just came back from all this, and I was like, no, as long as I'm wearing my gloves and I'm protected. Even, my doctor's like, hey, like, I think it's a little bit too soon for you to come back. I was like, you know what, I think it's a good idea, just because of everything that happened. But
for your mental health?
Yes, exactly. Because, in back of my head, it's like, oh my God, imagine if I get it again, which I know maybe it could happen. I don't know if it's true, but
I'm not sure. The CDC.
Yeah.
We'll look for them for answers.
Yeah.
I don't know the answers.
So I don't know. My fear is to get it again or get like my dad sick. That's my fear. And it's a fear that you should not be living with. I'm guessing, but that's because of what I went through.
I don't think. I mean, fear is fear, whether we should or shouldn't. I think the reality is we're all living with it.
Yeah. And I get freaked out, I get freaked out very easily. I think it's just, I don't know. I don't want to call, maybe it's a trauma, what we went through, and it was very painful, it was painful. Like, that's why I said COVID has two phases. The phase that, you get sick, and then the phase that emotionally drains you, especially if it's like your dad or your mom or like your baby sister. It's like, it's very tough, and I don't wish this upon nobody, because, it was just too much,
I have a 6-year-old daughter. I really struggled back and forth about school and what we should do, and one time she said, Mom, I dream of anything normal. that really impacted me. And when you said your doctor that you work with
Mm-hmm.
mentioned like it might be too early, and you said no, it's a good idea, like what I thought in my head was that potentially you could have been craving something normal, or what was it that made you be brave and scared at the same time?
Well, you know, my husband had a lot to do with it. He's like, no, it's good for you, because there was a day, that I wasn't thinking straight, because of all the phone calls I was getting from the hospital. I couldn't answer no more. So I passed the phone to my older brother, I'm the oldest, but he's the older brother. I couldn't answer the phone calls no more, I couldn't handle them telling me like, hey, your dad is so and so, And so when my dad started getting better, I was scheduled to go back to work, and that's when my husband's like, I think you should go to work, I think that'll be good. And my sister as well, she told me, I think, you should, like, it's a distraction, so, interacting with my other coworkers, and I think I had to go to work to put up strength, for my family.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm honored. I know the community will be honored, and thank you so much for sharing that you wanted to hear more about spiritual health and mental health, and we look forward to bringing you more conversations like this.